really nothing left of him but the guts. Welcome back to Ipso Facto, and before the break, we were listening to Alan Guadalajara talk about how he got his child's head caught in a Fisher-Price My First Threshing Machine toy, and now the poor little blighter's ears whistle whenever he attempts to sing. And don't forget that next week we are speaking to poet, tickle enthusiast, wearer of cardigans, poet, hater of mongoose, and third-time lookalike a Pope of the Year in Flappy Groins, Cheshire, Yehudi Menuhin, no relation. But now, to finish out tonight's episode, it's Plumehampton spoon-bending chiropodist and renowned puncher of the elderly, Jeff Aladdin, who has a very interesting hat. Jeff Aladdin, good evening.
Oh, please, Cecil, call me Aladdin. Jeff was my aunt's name.
Very well. So, what have you come to show us this week? Aladdin.
That's Aladdin. It's pronounced Aladdin.
I thought that's what I said.
Not even close, but like a true professional, I'll make do.
You really are very gracious.
Don't kiss my arse, Cecil. I'm well aware of my abundant curiosities.
I really am very lost for trousers. Words. Sorry, I meant words. Anyway, why not tell us all about your very special hat? Man who till recently went by the name of Jeff.
Well, it's a very special hat. It has a purple brim.
I can see that.
And it has a shiny mauve interior.
Right, most hats do.
Yes, but can most hats send you into the orbit of the Earth, traversing time and space in mere moments?
Well, no.
This one can.
No, it can't, Jeff.
Aladdin.
Whatever.
It can too. Now watch.
For the audience listening on the wireless, Jeff Aladdin has put on his purple-brimmed hat and has most definitely not gone into orbit around the Earth.
Yes, I have.
No, you haven't. You're still sitting opposite me in that outrageously flamboyant orange onesie and those bunny slippers.
I am not. I'm in space.
If you were in space, you wouldn't be able to hear me. Idiot. Space is a vacuum and no noise can travel through it.
Actually, that's not entirely true. In some of the more crowded areas above the Earth's atmosphere, some sound can travel. It's only in the empty, deep areas of space that sound can't be heard.
It doesn't matter. You're still not orbiting the Earth. You're here in our studio making peculiar hand gestures and a face like a fish.
A non-believer, ladies and gentlemen. A weak-minded cynic of the highest order. First day of the revolution, we'll have all of you communists burnt.
Right, but until then, could you kindly leave? I've let this whole studio out this weekend on Airbnb, and I have some Dutch photography students arriving any minute, and I need to get all the damn cauliflower out of these seat cushions. Also, I need to disguise myself as a pot plant so as to observe their liberal Dutch frolicking and photography. You know, for art and nipples.
I can't hear you. I'm in space.
Well, that's all we have time for. Next week, we will also be showcasing songs from the new Broadway adaptation of the film Anthropomorphicus the Beast. Good nightingale. And now on the Radio Flange Goblet, it's Most of My Limbs Are Greek, a 4-part miniseries about the life of Teddy Nahaj, inventor of the After-Movie Diner.
You're listening to the After Movie Diner with your host, Jon Cross.
He is the owner, proprietor, and editor of AYTIWS.com. That's And You Thought It Was Safe, AYTIWS.com. He's also the host of their fantastic film video review series. He's also our beloved comic book expert and wonderful Oregonian. It's none other than the man, the legend, the hair. It's Mr. David DeMoss. How are you, sir?
Excellent. Quite well. Happy April. Happy Easter.
Happy April Fool's Day. Happy Easter. Happy Festival of the, I don't know, goddess of sexual intercourse, probably. This is...
Probably,
I was thinking today, only Christians could take a fertility festival and go, how can we possibly stop people thinking about sex? Oh, I know, the image of a grown man nailed crudely into some wood. That'll stop some boners. That'll stop some erections, right?
You'd think, right? But of course, then the Renaissance came on around, and photorealistic painting. There we go. Suddenly, lots of sexy Jesuses. I swear, it's that and that mixture of that gorn. Yes, I think it's called now. Yeah.
I definitely think that Jesus would have a six-pack, said someone at some point, and let's make him white. How about that? Let's make him
like
white
the marble statues that we're also working on that all have like 9 packs or something.
Well, it is
because that's what
ridiculous.
People look like, right?
No. I do love it. People are like, oh, isn't it so cute? All the little chicks and bunnies and eggs. And I'm like, it's all about fucking. That's what it is. It's all about fucking eggs and bunny rabbits. And
you don't have to be a Freudian, right, to see the subtext. It's kind of just text.
Yeah, right. But people are like, oh, it's so cute and it's good for the children.
Exactly. That would be like the modern Christian take on it. Like, how do we kidify this?
Yeah, right,
how can we make it a safe activity to distract the kids for 5 minutes so we can talk about adult shit, I guess.
Yeah, right. It's people forget, spring is about fucking and autumn is about dying. That's what it's all about. That's why I will go with fertility and then Halloween. I'll go with those 2 festivals over anything else because they at least make sense they even make sense from a scientific standpoint in the sense of seasons changing and things growing and things dying. Like, it all makes sense. Like, so much more than fucking Christ.
Even pieces of fully Christianized holidays like Christmas. Of course, you set a tree on fire. It's the middle of fucking winter.
Right.
Everything sucks.
Exactly.
So you get everybody together, you light a tree on fire, and you eat whatever the hell you got left over. It's perfect. Yes,
plus, I love considering the way that the Western world feels about Germany, even now, 70 years later, and yet they still essentially celebrate their holiday, which is Christmas. It's a German holiday. But there we go. It's all very exciting. It's nice to know that you and I, sir, have at least read a book in our life. And not just blindly believing parrot fashion what's been told to us by our lessers and our elders.
Or much worse, just reading. I run into people now, they say they don't have the attention for books anymore. They just read blog posts. And I'm like, Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
Shiver down, goose walks over my grave. It's just like,
Exactly. So anyway, welcome to how's
the man flu treating you out there on the East Coast?
I was going to say, welcome to the thin or rather thick and heavy veil of disease that has fallen over the After Movie Diner. I probably have been on and off ill with the flu / bronchitis / nobody knows what the fuck it is for 7 days. And then my good lady Kim became ill yesterday with her own brand of flu. So our apartment is going to have to be fumigated and hosed down in Lysol or something.
Sterilized completely. Yeah, just microwave it all.
They're just going to burn everything and start again.
It sounds like you're getting what hit us like last month. Basically, that's where I disappeared to for like a week and a half. And yeah. Just because it's been really bad this year, all over the fucking place. I want a refund for that flu shot I got back in November because, obviously not working, even though I know that's not how it works. It's probably crisscrossed the country like 4 times by now, mutating through everybody's systems.
Well, that's the funny thing is that they did the flu test, and it wasn't, thankfully, the flu. And then they did various other tests, and they had me go get an X-ray. And various other stuff. But still, I'm sat there in the doctor's on Friday, the 3rd doctor's visit, And I'm like, so what is it? Is it bronchitis? Because she's looked at my x-ray. She's like, it's not TB. It's not pneumonia. It's not like they've gone through all the things. It's not. I'm like, so what is it then? Like, can we just say it's bronchitis and give me the happy pills and we go on thing? And she's like, well, we could do this test. We could do that test. I'm like, fucking American healthcare, man. Like, nobody wants to just say it's this, take this and fuck off. They want to go, well, we could stretch this out of 3 more weeks with a barrage of meaningless tests that'll cost you hundreds of dollars. And
Bingo.
Then she goes, she actually looks at me and goes, well, what do you want to do? And I'm like, I'm not the doctor, lady. I want to go back to work on Monday. I know that's a crazy fucking thing to say, but I do. So in the end, I just I felt well enough that I was just like, look, I'm going to walk out of here. I'm going to drink a shit ton of cough syrup and sleep for 48 hours and just hope that works. So that's where I'm at right now.
And that's the American healthcare system, right there.
Right, because in the UK, right, you go in, they do the same series of tests, but it doesn't cost you anything, and then they go, it's this, take this, and never come back again. You know what I mean? Whereas
they want to get you in and out. Right. They got other people, right, who probably have worse things going.
Yeah, over here they're like, well, we could do a CAT scan, we could do an MRI, we could have a stand over in the corner and someone could poke you with sticks for 3 weeks, we could have some injections, we could draw blood, we could do some leech tests. Like, I'm just thinking, listen, guys, this is all very fantastic that you have all this stuff, but, you've looked at my x-ray, I don't have, like, a mass on my lungs, so let's just move on. Like, let's just assume I'll get better.
What good is having stuff if you don't get to play with it, right? It's there. And
if you don't get to charge me for it.
Exactly. It costs to use. Like, my best friend is currently trying to get a CAT scan scheduled, but of course her insurance decided not to pay for it, and the hospital decided that some line on some form had not been filled out correctly. So every time, every time an addition or subtraction has to be made, these forms have to go through from the hospital to the insurance company to her employer and then back around again.
Oh, that's the worst, man. That's the worst.
And so it's just been, meanwhile, it's whatever it is that she can't even figure it out yet because they won't even do the test. Right. Won't even schedule until all the forms are filled out and everything is in order. And it's just like, it's great. Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, she even went as far as she was like, well, we could do all this stuff. I'm like, I'm not going to do any of that stuff. She's like, right, so, well, I think you should probably go see a specialist. And I'm like, no,
nope. Yep.
I'm not going to go do that either. Because guess what? You charge me $40 a visit. A specialist's going to charge me $150 a visit. It ain't happening, lady. I mean, unless you think that I'm going to go outside and fall down and convulse in the next 30 seconds and I'm actually in danger of losing my life, then I'm really not going to do any of these things you suggest. Thanks so much, though. Like, can I get any medication? She was like, no. So I was like, all right, fine. Whatever. She actually got like the huff with me, and I'm like, I can't believe I'm paying $40 nut every time I come see you guys. This is the third fucking time, and you've got the humph with me because I happen to point out just how much you're trying to take me for a fucking ride here. What a waste of time, man. What a waste of time. Anyway.
Yeah, the 48-hour sleepathon is generally what I use these days for everything anyway.
Shit ton of whiskey. And sleep.
Yep, clear liquids like vodka, gin.
Yeah. Anything with vitamin C in it, really. That works.
That's why I go for the rum.
Indeed.
Two birds with one stone. Mixes with all major fruit groups.
So, ladies and germs who have listened to the After Movie Diner in previous years and incarnations will know that when you hear Mr. DeMoss's dulcet tones wafting over from the fair city of Portland, Oregon, that Marvel movies, or comic book movies in general, but Marvel movies are about to be discussed I would say comic book movies, but to be fair, I don't think we've talked about a DC movie since Nolan let go of the reins. Which is a shame, actually, because I did really love Wonder Woman. So we can talk about that briefly if you want. But this time around, every other podcast worth their salt did a Black Panther podcast. And the week the Black Panther came out, I actually found that Ganja and Hess, which is a very esoteric blaxploitation vampire art house movie from 1973, was screening at the Roxy, and so people will remember that Jim and I instead went to hell with doing a Black Panther podcast. We're going to do a Gandra and Hess podcast and go back to where, to some extent, African American filmmaking began in its sort of modern incarnation.
Let me just interrupt you to say that I did appreciate your counter programming.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, I felt like I should. Everyone else was doing Black Panther podcast. But then, of course, some weeks went by and it stopped being sold out because our local cinema was sold out 3 times when Kim and I went to try and watch it. Finally, it had stopped being sold out. We actually went to see the film. And so after I saw the film, I was like, fuck. Now I have to kind of do a podcast on it because it's one of those films that demands to be spoken about. I have to say, when the hype first started around Black Panther, there was a part of me, as you know, David, I'm well versed within the 70s and the 90s wave of African American filmmaking, and
Indeed.
I've seen movies with all black casts and all black leads and so on before. To me, it is not some big surprise. So there was a slight cynicism in me when I saw everyone losing their shit over Black Panther. I was like, come on, guys. Unlike
the rest, that these films do actually exist, and that this is not the first. Though, of course, it is the first time that a $210 million one has been made by one of the big 5 studios, assuming they're even 5 anymore. Do I have to go big 4 now?
I think there's big 3, isn't it? I mean,
yeah, right.
I mean, it depends how far you go up, because obviously there's Marvel Studios, but then it's broken out by Columbia, Paramount, Universal, Disney, Sony. Yeah. They've all distributed Marvel movies at some point or another. So.
Well, the Sony, the Columbia Sony deal is part of the Spider-Man deal. Talk about that if you want, but whatever.
Oh yeah, no, we'll go through. But no, I just wanted to say the funny thing was I watched Black Panther and I was like, shit, now I have to eat my words because, and we'll get on to talk about the movie. But there was so much in it where I'm like, okay, I actually see why this film matters in a way that. I wasn't saying it didn't matter, but I certainly didn't think it necessarily mattered as much as it actually does.
It's a pleasant surprise when they live up to their hype, isn't it?
Yes, and we'll definitely get there. But that's sort of why, whatever it's been, a month and a half down the road, we're finally doing a Black Panther podcast. But before we kind of get onto that film directly, the last time you and I spoke, sir, I believe we were talking Doctor Strange and Ant-Man.
Yes.
Since then, we've had Guardians 2, Spider-Man Homecoming, and Thor Ragnarok. I have to say, I've been pretty, and you know my feeling on Civil War and Age of Ultron was particularly lukewarm, and I can't say that Galaxy 2...
As was mine.
Yeah, as I can't say that Galaxy 2, even Spider-Man Homecoming or Thor Ragnarok really blew my skirt up. I mean, there was moments in each one, but I can't say any of them lived up to it. How are you feeling, though, sir, about those movies and, in general, where the MCU stands before, obviously, Infinity War kicks off?
Phase 3 in general, yes. The thing about Phase 3 that has genuinely surprised and elated me is that, as I'm pretty sure we talked about with Doctor Strange, they're finally growing the reproductive organs necessary to just say to hell with it and go full Jack Kirby. Guardians 2 spoke to me because, of course, they went full Jack Kirby in the form of one of his more popular and esoteric creations, Ego, the Living Planet. Spider-Man Homecoming spoke to me by going full Jack Kirby and just once again taking him back to high school, but also in following what has used to be known as the Marvel method in terms of its supervillains. In that, your supervillains, it's better. It's a better story when they have like sympathetic backstories and understandable motivations for why they do what they do. And you might even come to the end of an issue more rooting for them than for the hero. Vulture was right, by the way, just so you know. That's my new movement, and our banner shall be Michael Keaton's creepy smiling face.
Indeed.
Good old Spider-Man. And Thor Ragnarok spoke to me because, of course, it was going full Jack Kirby in the exploration of the intergalactic side of the Marvel universe, much more so than any previous Thor movie, or really even the Guardians movies, which are they explore a decidedly like working class Star Warsy side of things, right? You don't go full Gladiator movie with it, with the Guardians of the Galaxy. You could, but they haven't so far. So
right. I think my
and
feeling...
then we come to this. Sorry, but then we come to this, which is fucking Wakanda.
Right. No, I mean, I think my feeling on Thor Ragnarok, which I did watch in the lead up to Black Panther, I'm trying to watch all these in order, and I even rewatched Civil War to see if it got any better, and it hadn't. And I rewatched Guardians 2 to see if it got any better, and it had a little bit. Guardians 2 had a lot to live up to after Guardians 1, I felt like, and I also feel that the weird thing about Phase 3 has been, considering the push towards getting Thanos introduced and the Infinity Stones and all that throughout Phase 1 and Phase 2, it feels very odd that Phase 3 has been a sort of mishmash of introductions of either new and or existing characters, sort of odd one-off kind of stories, and thirdly, which I think Thor Ragnarok is sort of padding. Like, what was quite surprising by Thor Ragnarok was how absolutely irrelevant the plot was. Like the bad guy and all the rest of it. Like, yeah, okay, it took Thor from where he was to where he needs to be for Infinity War. In terms of like losing his hammer, losing his eye, and finding out he has a sister, et cetera, et cetera. But like in general, if none of that had happened, it really wouldn't have mattered in the grand scheme of things.
As few things on Asgard have actually mattered until this point. That's part of why I liked it was and I usually hate this kind of construction of opinions, but really it was the first Thor movie that actually like felt like a Thor movie. In that it had, almost no connection to Earth at all. Like, right. It's kind of, I get what you're saying, but it kind of works in reverse as well for some of us.
Yeah.
I mean, the Hulk's there and they're doing their buddy comedy thing. But that's because we're not going to get a Hulk movie.
Right. No, don't get me wrong. I mean, and this is the other thing I think is that, the other thing I wanted to briefly talk about before we got on to Black Panther was sort of, well, if you're going to do one-off movies, if you're going to do movies that don't necessarily play into if we're going to go with an X-Files metaphor, like the overarching conspiracy, we're going to do a Monster of the Week episode, then I really wish, like I'm kind of waiting for Thanos to be over. And the reason being is I have, like, the movies I'm most excited about, or the movies that I would be most excited about, are the ones that are these like standalone stories, right? Whether it's characters we've already seen, but they're giving their own focus, whether it's, I don't necessarily mean origin stories, I just mean like one-off stories using the sort of breadth and of all the characters that have already been introduced and will continue to be introduced through Phase 4 and so on. And I just, I put this thing out on Facebook and Twitter about this, sort of saying that, I would definitely love a new Howard the Duck movie. You and I have spoken before, Dave, about me really wanting a Howling Commandos movie. I would love a Warriors 3 movie. I would love a Howard the Duck and Spider Ham movie. There's sort of, and the funny thing is...
Also, I noticed lots of love for Moon Knight on the Twitters.
So we've got...
Which, why not? We got one, Nile deity here, and another one is the source of his powers. So let's go for it.
Yeah,
what the hell? Why not?
We've had other people on Facebook have talked about the Master of Kung Fu. Joe would love a Master of Kung Fu. Moon Knight brought up a lot. Someone was saying let's do a Blade sort of reboot, or like start up Blade again. Try and bring Blade
at least fit him in here somewhere, right?
Right, exactly.
We've had immortal ninjas. Where are the vampires? They got to be around here somewhere.
Exactly. So Midnight Suns was another one that someone brought up.
Ooh. Now that, yeah, okay.
Dazzler, set in the early 80s.
Yeah.
Said.
Now we're getting kind of wishful, because she's an X-Men character,
right?
So, yeah. Things are up in the air with that at this point. I have no concrete information whatsoever. But of course, the X-Men fans are all just chomping at the bit now at the idea that there might be mutants again in a Marvel universe,
right.
Especially since Black Panther was married to Storm at one point.
Yeah.
Which, yeah.
Could get interesting. And then someone also mentioned the West Coast Avengers, as they already nearly have the whole thing cast anyway.
Yep. Just a couple more. Yeah. They've just and they could always do what usually happens with Avengers teams, where they all come together to fight like one of the remainers, someone who hasn't been introduced yet, and that person joins the team, because they're always recruiting their villains. So yeah, it could be. Though of course the problem with that is the problem with West Coast Avengers in the first place, which is that most of the cast are, not to put too fine a point on it, but second stringers.
Right.
I mean, there's, a justice for Hawkeye, right?
Well, yeah, I think while what Marvel has done is obviously unprecedented and very interesting, a lot of people have said that the way the phases have gone, we haven't been able to have a Planet Hulk movie. We haven't been able to have a Black Widow movie. There are certain characters that have got the short thrift. There's stuff that's been done on Netflix that maybe should have been a movie, and vice versa. And there's also this idea of being bogged down in either origin story abyss. In other words, well, here we go. We've got to trot out this hero. This hero has to have its, classic iconic villain. It's got to fight that in the first movie, and then we'll go on and do something interesting with it. We've had this time and time again. But we've also become bogged down with sort of the soap opera of it. In other words, sort of each one pushing into the other one, adding into the other one, adding into the other one, sort of building up to an Avengers movie every 3 to 4 years. And I think, while I completely understand, what I've just described is essentially the comic books. Comic books do much the same thing. I think that I'm waiting for Marvel to become a little unshackled of its formula, as it were, its through line, and to kind of go, we can do a Planet Hulk movie, but by the way, this Hulk has nothing to do with the Hulk you've already been watching. Or we can do a Moon Knight movie, or we could do a Howard the Duck movie, but by the way, it's not Guardians of the Galaxy Howard the Duck, it's just a Howard the Duck movie. And we can do a Warriors 3 movie, even though they've sadly and just angrily, from my point of view, have now been killed.
Summary execution, yes.
Which was just so... I was just so annoyed, because I'm like, you never really gave them their due, and then they just get killed in something that essentially was the, fluffiest of fluff movie, which was Thor Ragnarok, in terms of it amounting to anything. And so it was... I'm just looking for that thing where they're like, fuck it. This doesn't have to be these actors even. Like, we could do a Hulk movie which stars someone else, and we can just go off and do it. Like, I
noticed Edward Norton and Liv Tyler were missing from that class photo they took.
Right? Yeah. I did notice that.
But that's again some more studio politics.
Right.
Yeah.
I just mean in general, I would love another World War II Captain America movie with the Howling Commandos and Tales of Daring Do and all the rest of it. And people would be like, but how does this fit into the timeline? I'm like, it doesn't have to. Let's just assume he didn't come forward in time yet, and he's still in World War II with the Howling Commandos. Like, that for me would be a great sort of one-off movie. So I've come up with this like idea of the alternate Marvel Cinematic Universe. Like, you can keep this through line going, but here is sort of the dream project I would like. Do you have any? I mean, every time they announce one, it must be for yourself as a comic book fan. You must just be like, "Oh my god, this is amazing!" But do you have any that you kind of wish they would do?
Oh, it's interesting for me because so many of the people in charge came out of the crucible of the 90s. So they have managed to recreate pretty much everything that was emblematic of that era of comic books in their movies. That's the thing you're describing about the soap opera is what we know of as crossover fatigue.
Right.
The perpetual, origin story used to be everybody was getting a new number 1 issue of something or another every other month because that was all driving a speculator's bubble that we didn't know was just about to burst. The constant build up to a big crossover event, usually big summer crossover events. That whole trend started in the 90s. But they used to have something very much like what you were describing. It was called What If? Is this whole series of, alternate takes on famous Marvel Universe events. And there used to be a lot more one-shots and one-offs that had little, if anything, to do with major continuity. But nowadays, it's all about that cross-market promotion, I'm afraid.
Yeah.
The people in charge have no incentive whatsoever to change anything about what they're doing. Because, even their lowest movies still make like $800 million. So
right. No, and I guess it's just for me. I guess I worry that we're going to go down this line and they're going to roll out third parts and fourth parts and new characters and fourth phase and fifth phase and so on, and sort of there are some good stories that are still to be told. Using the characters that we kind of met, that would be really interesting to kind of go back and explore, whether that's recasting them or whether that's, okay, we'll do a one-off with these guys who are no longer under contract, but we'll give them X amount for this movie and da-da-da-da-da. Just because... Yep. The stories they've chosen to the stories they've chosen to tell have been shackled to some extent by this idea of developing a larger kind of overarching universe, while at the same time, building into the Infinity Stones and this whole thing, and forming the Avengers and everything. And we spoke. When we did our Avengers episode and sort of all the movies that led into it, we spoke about this idea of it being a little rushed or feeling a little rushed, or while at the same time kind of going, it's odd that while it was rushed, there was so much padding in some of the movies. Like it was sort of this frustrating thing where it would just be nice to see them do some other stories with these characters now that they're there. I'm less interested in the bring 50 superheroes together to fight one big guy, because what ends up happening, and it happened in Civil War, but what ends up happening is that they all roughly have, at a certain point, the same kind of super abilities, more or less, bar like one or two. You know what I mean? And you start to look at Ant-Man and Iron Man, for example, and you go, well, wait a minute, why wouldn't Iron Man have Ant-Man tech in his suit, or why wouldn't Ant-Man have Iron Man tech in his suit? Like, why build a suit? If you could build a suit that can do all the stuff that their suits can do anyway, it's not like too much extra tech to like add shrinking or enlarging or flight or whatever it is. So like you start.
And this is how people start designing evil androids that can copy everybody's superpowers. Yes.
Right. So I just mean that you start to kind of see the sort of crossover in powers anyway. So I'm less interested in the whole, 50 superheroes come together to just hit a big superhero repeatedly.
Somebody's inevitably going to, with a cast that large and unwieldy, somebody's inevitably going to get the short shift. It always happens. It even happens when there's just 6 of them.
Or they're going to die.
Oh, yeah. Well, that too.
Right.
Yeah.
Or they're going to do this random thing where, like we don't even have time, but like the trajectory of Hawkeye, like that has been such a bizarre thing, because they feel like he's the character they can stick into an Avengers movie, and his characteristics can change depending on what they need him to be or need him to do or need him to say. Like, there was at one point where they're like, oh, suddenly he's the heart of the Avengers. And, like, without him, it all falls apart. And I'm like, what? Wait, when was that established? Like, he was the dude who sat up in the nest and they were, like doing nothing but observing everybody. But, like, his observational powers have never been put to great effect in any of the movies. And, things like that, it just becomes a bit... annoying, I guess. Also, the whole
huge and unwieldy. Yes.
Yeah. Well, also the whole thing. Like, one of my things about a Winter Soldier and Civil War is I don't feel like Bucky was established enough so that when he goes through his, brainwashing transformation into villain, hero / ambiguous guy, I don't feel like I know him or care enough about any of that before that happens.
No, because we only got half a movie with Sergeant Barnes, and that was Captain America's movie, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, and I forgot by the time Winter Soldier came around, I was like, wait, who's that a guy? Who's that? That's the same guy?
That's part of why I love his first line is like, who the hell's Bucky?
Right.
I'm like, good question, buddy.
Yeah, so anyway, that's where I hope the universe goes. Now let us swivel our seats back to Black Panther. And sir, why don't you start off with first your kind of history with the character, if any such exists, and then secondly, kind of your first feeling after watching the movie.
I got in on the 1998 series by writer Christopher Priest, which was a relaunch of Black Panther's solo title after a long hiatus and a whole bunch of guest starring one-shots in team-up books. But that was, it turned out, a good place to jump on, because that was when, for lack of a better word, Black Panther stories got modernized. Like a lot of what's in this movie is straight out of the 70s. But things like Okoye and Nakia and Everett Ross were all Christopher Priest's inventions. That whole supporting cast, right?
Yeah.
So basically, they made this is my, quote unquote, my Black Panther movie. They made this for me.
Yeah.
Though they beefed up Everett, since it used to be the only thing he ever flew was a desk at the State Department. But whatever. He's CIA now, So and I get to make all kinds of jokes about Special Agent Bilbo Baggins.
Right.
So
and
that's
is he related to the other Ross, General Ross or whatever?
I wish. Nope.
No.
Yep.
Okay.
Amazing coincidence. Apparently, just one of those, right?
Fair enough. Because Ross showed up in. Well, they both showed up in Civil War.
He's the
right?
Secretary of State now.
Yeah, they both showed up in Civil War, right?
Yep.
Yeah, which was our first introduction to Black Panther, of course, which was Civil War, which is why I watched it in the lead up to this.
Gotta love those backdoor pilots, don't you? Doesn't it feel like an 80s TV movie again?
Yeah, right.
It's like time is a flat circle. But that run of the comics, which basically didn't end, is still kind of ongoing. They just keep, it's Marvel, so they keep canceling things and then starting up a new series like 2-3 months later so they can put out another #1 issue. It's basically still ongoing, and that's where most of this comes from, basically.
Yeah.
So seeing it all splashed across a 40-foot screen was something that I never dared dream of, since really going back now, I uncover memories that, they were going to do one of these in the 90s, and Wesley Snipes was going to be in the cat suit.
Yep.
But
he'd been trying for a long time to get that put together.
he only did Blade instead at the last minute when this fell through, which I can't imagine that. But yeah, can't imagine what they would have done with it in the 90s.
Yeah, I mean, in the 90s, starring Wesley Snipes, it probably would have been more like a... not a straight-to-video, but it would have been more like a kind of 80s, 90s martial arts action movie where he happened to be in a costume, I feel like. I don't feel like it would have gone full, African traditions, full kind of African continent, clothing and styles and all the stuff that's in this movie. I don't imagine they would have gone there. He would have been a guy in LA who was called a Black Panther. Or New York. Fighting non-discriminate bad guy people, much in the same vein as almost every kind of 80s and 90s action movie. Probably
Indeed.
like the Hasselhoff Nick Fury film.
Yes, indeed. Oh my God. I always heard Living Well is the best revenge. But to be fair, the Panther has spent several large chunks of his continuity doing just that. He has been, frequently been lost the Game of Thrones, shall we say, and been exiled from his homeland and had to basically just kick around America doing stuff. And those tend to be the adventures people remember the most. Like, that's how he wound up fighting the Klan in the 70s under his first solo series. That's how he wound up fighting apartheid in the 80s. And just, yeah.
Now, I don't know.
Possible future. Shall we say?
I don't know, because I've not read any of the comic books from back then, but sort of, was there any kind of Luke Cage Black Panther crossover back in the day, like back in the 70s or 80s, or not really?
Oh, God. I'm almost positive that the answer is yes, because, though I can't call you issue and date at the moment, because he joined the Avengers in 1968, basically.
Right.
And didn't get his own title until 1973. But, after that point, frequent trips to America, of course. And frequent team-ups with lots of other heroes. Daredevil is the most famous because the two, I don't know, they clicked, shall we say.
Oh, what, Luke Cage and Daredevil?
No, Daredevil and Black Panther.
Oh, Daredevil and Black Panther. Oh, okay.
And that's the most famous crossover. But of course, also Spider-Man and most of the friendly neighborhood heroes of his universe.
Right.
And as most of them have become affiliated with the Avengers at one point or another. It's just all great big incestuous clusterfuck, basically. It's just what happens when everybody's based in New York.
Right, exactly.
I'm just glad, you haven't watched the Netflix series, but I have. And frankly, I was just glad to get out of New York and get this show on the road, really, because it can get pretty, claustrophobic at times.
Yeah. I've only watched the first season of Daredevil and about the first 3 episodes of Jessica Jones. And I haven't watched any more than that because because getting through Daredevil, the first series, was a slog and a half. Getting through Jessica Jones, and it's funny because I can put on. It's not even the length apparently, because I've just been, while I've been off sick, I've been watching a TV series called Endeavour, which is the prequel to Inspector Morse, which is its own, which is its own universe. If you like grumpy old white detectives, Inspector Morse basically has a sequel, which is Inspector Lewis, which is after Morse dies, his sergeant becomes an inspector, and he goes off and has his own series, and then they went and did the prequel, which is Inspector Morse back in the 60s, starting in 1965, I think, and then each series is a new year. And each of those episodes is an hour and a half long. They're movies, essentially, because that's kind of how they do it on ITV in the UK. We're going to make 4 movies, screen them back to back, that's the season, and then we'll do another 4 movies the following year. And I just sat and watched 16 of those. So it's clearly not the length or the commitment. It's just that I'm not that drawn to any of the characters for whatever reason. Like, I just can't get into it in the same way. And I want to, because, in the same way that I would have loved to have sat down and watched all 28 episodes or whatever it is of Agent Carter. But I just, for whatever reason, I just don't have the inclination or the man hours for some reason. I don't know why.
I'd once again recommend The Punisher to you.
Yeah, everyone's saying that, but I'm not a
all
Bernthal
kinds of
fan.
good shit, John.
I'm not a Bernthal
all
fan.
kinds of good shit.
Not a Bernthal fan. That's my problem, and you
do wind up staring at his sledgehammer of a face for most of it. So yes, exactly. I understand.
Plus, they got rid of my boy Ray Stevenson now twice in the Marvel universe. So I'm not that happy with him. Check out
the production schedule waits for no man.
Yeah, right. Exactly. But yeah, so Black Panther. When I first, like I said, very cynical going in, and certainly wasn't, when I went in, I certainly wasn't thinking, oh, really, what are they going to do with comic book movies that is really going to blow my mind? And to be perfectly honest, there's nothing about the storyline or the comic book elements, in quotation marks, that does blow my mind about Black Panther. If anything, it's a fairly generic kind of style, take a bit from here, take a bit from there, throw in a bit of this, throw in a bit of that, in terms of plotting and story. Where its genius lies, what is truly groundbreaking for comic book movies and for blockbuster movies in general, and what it does, which is one of the things that I love the most about any kind of genre film, and what the ability genre films have to do, is that, yes, it tells a very generic comic book movie plot, but it does so in such a way that it is talking about almost all aspects, ranging from the very traditional to the very modern, of African American culture, and how that culture is then perceived by society. It's talking about all those aspects without being like, hello, this is a big, heavy message movie. It's talking about all those things, and it's all there if you want to see it. And it's funny, recently, again, while I was off sick, I revisited, because I was on a bit of a Larry Cohen kick, so I revisited Black Caesar, which is a phenomenal movie with Fred Williamson in the lead, for people who don't know. which is essentially like Fred saying, I would love to do my own Jimmy Cagney movie. I would love to do my own like gangster movie. And so Larry Cohen writes a story about a guy kind of coming up in Harlem in the 60s and 70s to kind of form his own underworld, gangster underworld, trying to take it legit, while also kind of facing all the different kind of societal elements that one can imagine a kind of a black gangster would come across in Harlem in the 70s. And where the comparison lies is that both movies, their strength and their clever writing and their importance lies in what they're saying, the way they're saying it, and the fact that they're not beating you over the head with it, yet they're managing to come out at the end sort of having their cake and eating it too, but in the best possible way, in a way where you're like, of course they should have all that. You know what I mean?
Yes, I do. Yes, I completely agree.
That's what I really loved about it, and all the things that it was talking about. And and I'm a big fan of the filmmaker Ryan Coogler. I thought what he did with Creed was amazing. Big Fruitvale Station fan, and obviously Michael B. Jordan. So like I knew I was in safe hands in terms of that, but just the way they were able to talk about everything from kind of modern, still existing poverty within the community, all the way through to the traditional kind of roots of that culture, how the roots of that culture are really the roots of the world and the roots of humanity in general.
Culture, yes.
And then obviously they had the best, like you said about villains earlier, they had a villain in Killmonger who was like 99.9% right. Like you could be on his side, certainly philosophically for most of it. I mean, we wouldn't necessarily turn to violence in the way that he did, but certainly what he was saying about the way Wakanda was being with its resources and wealth, plus the way the world was being in general with the culture, and his chip on his shoulder from both those things. Like you were totally on his side 90% of the film.
Indeed. But then of course, I being me, I thought about it for a second, and I'm like, ooh, this guy, he's so American, it hurts. Like, because his plan is also, of course, basically U.S. foreign policy for the last 40 years.
Right,
Totally. We'll just give a bunch of weapons to people. That'll totally make them our friends. And there's no chance they'll possibly turn those against us in our wannabe empire in the future. No, that never happens. I'm like, yeah, yep. And yet, yes, I totally buy it. Because, of course, he didn't think this through very well past the point of getting to Wakanda, as we see when he drinks the herb juice and he has his vision. Where does he wind up? He winds up back in that apartment where he found his dead dad. He's never left there. He's always there, and he's just stayed there his whole damn life.
You mean the This Is Us flashback?
Exactly, and it's beautiful. I love that.
It is. Big Sterling K. Brown fans in our household.
Hell yes. And, oh, God, just the amount of awesome actors they managed to pack into this thing, too. Like, elevating what would just be completely procedural roles to, something. I mean, God, I'm always happy to see Forrest Whitaker anywhere. And but to see him playing a high priest, I mean, damn, yes, exactly. That's perfect casting.
Big shout out to my lady, Angela Bassett. I mean, just,
yes.
She needs to. I've been saying this
mother.
forever, but she needs to be in everything, and it feels like she is from time to time kind of discovered again. Even though we all know that she's wonderful and she exists, she is occasionally discovered
she hasn't
again.
gone anywhere.
Yeah. She's discovered again by blockbusters, and it's always a joy to see her in there. I mean, I would have liked to have seen her kicking ass, because we know that she can kick ass. We know that she can hand out a good whooping when she needs to, but still, she was wonderful in the film.
right? And and of course you got to save something, right, for the sequel. This version of Queen Ramonda is from Ta-Nehisi Coates' run, which started in 2016, as are the Kimoyo beads. And yes, she can kick some ass. Yes,
of course. And I like, I mean, it was just one of those things where, like I was saying, the best comparison is sort of Black Caesar. There's this wonderful thing in Black Caesar, and it's also in the movie Bucktown as well to some extent. But it's this idea of, it's complicated, but it's this idea of, well, if an African American person, male, sort of rises to the height of power that a white man normally holds, that the other people within his community see him as someone who's now been corrupted by kind of white man's greed or white man's antics or white man tactics, and he becomes a character who's kind of damned if he does, damned if he doesn't kind of thing. Because on one hand you're saying, well, we would like the power that you guys all have, like we would love the ability to sort of have our own communities and our own empire and our own strength and our own whatever. But the moment anyone's in that position of power, of course, everyone resents them for being in that position of power, because they're like, now you're just down, treading us, rather than the white guy. Now it's this guy who's in power. And it's interesting to see that aspect of the culture kind of attacking itself. It's not always just about like white against black. Like once there are sort of black figureheads that can have their holes poked in terms of their philosophy or in terms of their power or in terms of whatever, and that happens a little bit in Black Panther with the dynamic between T'Challa and Killmonger, in the sense that T'Challa has this power, has this resources, has this wealth, has this stuff, and it's like, well, hang on a second, don't you have some responsibility now? Like, and then he's like, well, we don't want to necessarily be on the same playing field as every other country. Like, what's going on? So there's some really interesting kind of questions and dynamics answered that aren't always about skin color and aren't always about kind of usual roles in terms of antagonists and protagonists.
Because of course, people's is people's, right?
People's
no
is
matter
people's. No, totally, completely.
Where you are or what your skin color is, right? And I am happy as I am to see any of this on film. I was kind of sad they didn't get more into the internal politics of Wakanda, which, as you find out in the opening monologue, a confederation of actually 5 different tribes, all with their own little histories and patron deities, and we get a bit of this with the Jabari, because they're the unsociable mountain people, my people. Yeah. I know my people. So they're also like the Luddites of the community, right? They're the traditionalists, basically fundies.
And in the Black Panther movie, they're Henry the Red from Army of Darkness, because in the middle of the ending battle, all of a sudden, here comes Henry the Red,
Yep, of course, and that's why you spare people's lives, because you never know when you might need them for some backup.
Well, that's why you always respect and look after the bearded in your community, because the bearded will always eventually come to your rescue.
They'll just make a show about it first.
Yeah, right, of course. Yeah.
And very nice. Yeah. But of course, that's just one section, right? There's 4 more of them. There's your miners, your fishermen, farmers, and we do get Wakabi, who's on the border patrol, right? And we do get to see a little bit of them and about how they're slightly more militarily minded than everybody else, maybe, and more eager to go along with Killmonger's plan because of plot reasons, and because dude shows up on your door with a dead Andy Serkis. You're like, yep, here you go, I did it. Something your dumbass new king couldn't manage to do. Here you go. And even that was nice, though I am sorry to see international weapons dealer Gollum go. He was having fun when he got room to breathe, wasn't he?
He was. Well,
that was unexpected.
It's it's completely ridiculous. Kind of how talented Andy Serkis is in
really
terms of his acting ability, his ability with accents, his ability with obviously physicality and stop motion, all the rest of it. Like it really is, and it's nice to see him kind of finally getting his due. Whether it's I know he's a big part of Planet of the Apes, the new series, and obviously he was sort of in the
star, in fact.
Right.
Yes.
And in fact, the Marvel Universe for a while, there he was in there. And I would have liked to have seen him, continue. He was like a fun antagonist. He wasn't, he wasn't like the baddest of the bad, but he had like just a fun kind of, he was like the cheeky Cockney villain, or I mean, in this case, South African villain, but like the cheeky villain you love to hate, you know what I mean? Or you hate to love or whatever. And one of the things though that I absolutely loved as well about the Black Panther film was just how many genres it got in, because obviously we've had this thing for a long while where one of the big arguments lately has been, why can't we have a black Bond, right? Why can't we have a black James Bond, right? So what I loved about Black Panther was they were like, we can have a black James Bond. Look, here's our black James Bond sequence. And not only that, but it's going to be the best James Bond sequence that you've seen in the last, 5 James Bond movies.
He's hanging out at a casino. He's got his own Felix lighter, right? And everything.
So what I loved about it was that I'm like, every time, what I loved about the movie was you're like, not only are we going to have a black superhero, which is the first thing that we're told we can't have, but we're going to have a black, capital B, capital L, capital A, capital C, capital K superhero, which is going to be set in Africa with all our stuff, all our tribal stuff, all our generational stuff, all our historic stuff, we're just going to, and fuck you if you're not going along with it. It was just such a glorious fuck you to all the people who had ever said, you can't do this. It was just, everything was just like capital fuck, and I loved it because it was, you can't have a black James Bond, so here's this amazing black James Bond. There aren't enough, African-American characters in sci-fi. Here's a huge, science fiction sequence.
Here's an entire cast full of them, right?
Exactly.
Using actors from all over the world.
And it was absolute joy because I feel like there was no way to half-ass this. You know what I mean? Like you had to do it the way they did it. And funny enough, before it came out, I wouldn't have necessarily been able to have vocalized that and gone, this is what it should be. But once I saw it as for what it was, I was like, this is entirely what it should be. And then the sequel should triple down on all of this and just do so much more of this and be even more obtuse. Like if someone says, you can't do that. Like it's common wisdom, you can't do this. Just go, fuck it. We're going to do this, because the next thing will be, well, we can do it, but we can't do it with an African-American woman in the lead, right? So come on, let's go ahead and do that next, right? Because there are any number of wonderfully strong and awesome women in this film. That was the other thing about the movie is it's this. It's 2018. None of this should have to be said. The fact that it's still having to be said is, just fucking ridiculous. But okay, that's where we're at, right? And if this tears down some of those barriers and tears down some of those walls, then halla fucking Luya, here we go, open the floodgates. But I
kind of wanted Latita Wright to headline her own movie after this.
Right, exactly. I mean, she was amazing.
I admit, I do have a thing for them nerd girls, and
right?
and after, and after she calls Agent Bilbo a colonizer, he asked her some tech question, and she just can't help herself. She just makes with the exposition, and it's great.
Right.
And I'm like, oh shit. Sure. Oh shit, Shuri. Okay.
She's the best. We haven't had a Q that cool since Desmond Llewellyn died. No one on the Bond franchise has been that cool a Q. You know what I mean?
That's a great way to put it. Yes, that's a great way to put it. I love you for putting it that way.
Well, this was my whole thing. Like, forever, we've been waiting for Bond to go back to having, like, cool gadgets and shit, and we're told constantly by the makers of James Bond films, oh, that's not realistic in modern life to have gadgets and blah, blah. And you're like, who the fuck's dealing with realism, you fucking assholes? And then instead we get boring Benjamin Whishaw or whatever sitting there going, oh, it's a pen, James Bond, oh, and fucking Daniel Craig pouting at the camera like a boring twat. And you're just like, God, I just want to go back to that. And then here this was, in this movie, she has her lab with all her little gadgets and all the little things, and she's explaining how they work, and he's trying stuff on, and then there's the the thing that backfires, and the jokes and the stuff, and I was just like, oh my, yes, more of this, 100 times more of this, please. I loved every minute of it.
Great, yes, great Panther Cave too, and by God, this is another bit from the '90s comics. That's how they introduced it. That's when Killmonger got his the golden suit, the gold Jaguar, I called it, since he's American. Yeah. Most of his run, he just runs around with his shirt off, like Mr. Jordan does for most of the movie. But by God, there was this one time when he took everything over, and he, got the title, got the suit, and even fought Deadpool. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I think
don't get your hopes up, but yeah, still.
But you see, and that kind of brings back a little bit of my kind of wish fulfillment thing that we were talking about earlier about kind of one-off movies. The other thing that Marvel has kind of backed itself into a corner of is each of these movies has to either kill and or imprison and or rehabilitate its villain in a 2-hour movie. And I think that, the big problem with that is something like Eric Killmonger or whatever, that obviously has a much longer life in the... It was really... Like, my biggest problem with the movie was that he was killed because they've... The other thing is it's established that... Wakandans can save anyone and re-heal anyone, and they put together Bilbo's spine in 30 seconds or whatever it is. But they can't save they can't save Forrest Whitaker, which doesn't make any sense, and Killmonger has to die, which doesn't make any sense. I'm like, why not just fucking bring them back to life? We've already established that's a thing that apparently can happen, and have a movie where.
I was gonna say, yeah. There's reason to believe you don't need to worry because Killmonger been dead before.
Oh yeah, no, look, I get it. It's sci-fi.
His method of resurrection in the comics, I don't know if they could use since it involves another character who might be dead or never existed in the first place. But yeah, that's a whole other thing. Right. People know who I'm talking about.
Oh no, and I it's like the whole they've got rid of the purple flowers now. There'd be some other flowers growing in some cave somewhere that they'll stumble upon at some point. I understand how it was dramatically horrifying and scary for them to do it in the movie, but that's not it. T'Challa is not the last Black Panther in the line.
He better not be, because yes, there are a few ways they could go from here that would also fulfill some wishes of ours,
right?
Including ones that I've already voiced on this podcast. So, but I'll give them no. I understand why they had to do it, and yeah, I understand why they did what they did. I mean, Killmonger, part of why he's so good is because he is the Americanized Panther. He's and this is a story as it almost inevitably had to be of an outside force coming into Wakanda and Wakanda uniting against it, fighting off an immune system.
Yeah.
Like an immune system fighting off an invasion. Right. And that is a good way to introduce the setting and its world without so that way you can come back the next time and start playing with the rules and really fucking shit up.
No,
and his speech, by God, a good death is its own reward.
Right.
He gets a nice speech at the end and everything. So.
No, true, but I mean the ending again. Like I said, the plot and the ideas. definitely kind of pinch from other things, you know what I mean? And it was funny. There was like, there's always like Twitter trolls or whatever about these movies, and someone was like, what would you feel like if we did a movie where there was a white protagonist who lived in a fantasy realm and blah 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 blah? And we're like, there is one. It's called Thor. You know, I
was gonna say about that. Yeah, and I was gonna say about that plot. You know, it's interesting now that I know you've watched Ragnarok. Let me hit you with something, and you can tell me this sounds familiar, like without using any proper nouns. You know, a young monarch finding out that his dad was not the paragon of virtue he always thought he was, after his dad dies, and has to spend a whole movie dealing with the consequences of the evil shit his dad pulled back in the day, which have come back to haunt everyone in the form of a secret family member. Whom he overcomes, not necessarily through force of arms, although that helps, but more by utilizing knowledge of his homeland that his secret family member cannot possess. Right?
Yeah.
A little familiar, you know, because to be a hero, right, and not just a hero, to be the monarch, right, of a place, you got to know a place. You know, you got to know what it keeps in the mountains and down in the basement, right?
You're talking about King Ralph, right? That's what you're talking about?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly, yes.
You're talking about that fantastic John Goodman, Peter O'Toole culture clash comedy from the 90s.
Exactly.
King Ralph. Beautiful. Just fantastic. Everyone should check it out. But no, there's obviously huge, like Iron Man overtones in the end of the movie, especially right down with the little kid being like, "Who are you, mister?" And, you know, He was just about to be like, "I am Black Panther." But just like at the end of Iron Man 1. Do you think, so here's a question, do you think, obviously, a lot of rumors about who's going to snuff it during Infinity War that have a lot also to do with the size of their paycheck at this point, and also their age, and also just various other things. Do you think that in terms of sort of the role that Tony was playing in the Avengers, do you think that will be now kind of surpassed and T'Challa will kind of take over with that, or in terms of like funding shit and building shit?
Possible. Like yes, you may have noticed they have some obvious overlap between their skill sets and resource pools. But you know, I don't like to speculate. Let's just say that a few people could bite it, and the pieces are in place because really, you know, this has always also been a generational story as well. So I've got, let's just say, you know, I've got a few markers down.
Right. But what's funny is that everyone was obviously talking about the trailer to Infinity War with Tony meeting Star-Lord for the first time, and how they're kind of like them winding each other up is what everyone is looking forward to. I'm looking for Letitia Wright, or her character Shuri, meeting Tony for the first time and being like, "This is your tech? Fuck that. Look at this cool shit." Like, that's what I'm looking forward to. I'm looking forward to her pulling out some gadgets from her back pocket and putting him to shame.
Yeah, right. Finally do Extremis the right way.
Right? And her being like, "Hang on a second, I never created a mass evil robot that built clones of himself and almost toppled an entire country. I've managed to have this super advanced tech for fucking generations and never had a problem with it."
We've never, none of my, you know, friends and or former school classmates have turned evil and tried to kill me and kidnap, you know, any of my significant others.
Well, okay, there was the one.
Yeah, we were in high school. You know how it is. And Peter Parker will go, "Yep, I know."
Yeah.
After he picks his jaw up off the floor.
Yeah, I think I kind of got, like, it to me, going forward into sort of phase 4, phase 5, I'm more interested in, like, these secondary characters they're setting up. Like, I'm like, I don't necessarily want a whole movie about Shuri, but I want her in every movie from now on.
Right. Yeah. And, I could use more time with the various and sundry, strays that Thor picked up during his little adventure. And just in general. But of course, I would also, like you, have liked more one-offs preceding any of this with like all of the majors as well, because they've all got plenty of rogues galleries that have gone completely unexplored, and they're very interesting stories you could tell with each of them. And, even when they fuck up, like even when they fail, they managed to do more and more interesting things, like fucking, not to bring it back to Civil War, but totally will, like fucking Zemo, right? That was something.
Which character was that in Civil War?
The bad guy.
Right. The guy who had the footage of Tony's parents being
responsible for everything. Yes. I mean, he had an evil plan. He followed through, and it almost worked. It basically did work. And, consequences continuing to this day, they're going to have to spend half of Infinity War dealing with, probably. And that was, more than I expected or saw coming from the third-tier Captain America villain that I'd never been really that into. And Batroc the Leaper's still played by an MMA fighter, and he's wandering around somewhere and fucking got so many evil Tonys that could rise from their graves. And that's not even
Sam Rockwell's character, what's his name, is still in prison.
Yep.
The Mandarin is still out there, technically.
Yep. Both just disappeared, right? Yeah.
And they're in that one shot together. Shot together, yeah.
That little short they put on a Blu-ray that most people didn't buy, I'm sure.
Which
that's going to continue.
Doing. They've really stopped doing those little one-shots.
Really, yeah, they have. I think resources are being diverted towards the big show, more than likely.
Yeah. But no, so I mean, the strength of Black Panther as a movie as a whole was definitely the fact that they took the opportunity to both say something but also have fun with all the expectations in the best possible way. They cast the hell out of it. It was really well cast. And
costume designed the hell out of it as well. Shout out to Ruth Carter, costume designer, for her Pan-Africanism, which very nice to see. Yes. I mean, just nice in general. Never thought I'd hear the Xhosa language spoken in a major American motion picture.
Right.
But by God, there it was. And I'm like, okay, good job, guys. They even called out the goddess Bast by name, patron deity of Wakanda, goddess of motherhood and war, who gets you coming and going. Which, more than I thought. More than I ever really hoped for. And now I won't have to explain Black Panther to anybody ever again. I'll just point at this and be like, pretty much that.
Because if ticket sales are to be believed, then people have been going multiple times to this.
As well they should.
Yeah.
Shit. It's the virtue of something you haven't seen before, and it's the last one shot we're going to get before Infinity War. Yet they kept all of the continuity soap opera building crossover shit to the bare minimum. I even saw people being like, well, gee, where's Bucky? And I know you didn't stay all the way through the credits, did you?
I did, yes.
I
know where he is. He's in a little hut down by the water.
Yeah. The white wolf, which is itself a reference. But
yes.
Anyway. Sergeant Barnes.
No, I thought it was good. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of
another broken white boy for us to fix.
Yeah, right. But and obviously, there's a lot of cultural reasons, and I think a lot of cathartic reasons why this movie was as big as it was. and let's not obviously underestimate the huge swathe of white guilt that plays into people going to watch this, so they can then sit around and be like, "Hey, man, I'm down with Black Panther. I know what I'm talking about." So yeah, look, it's that's also to be expected, and I'm glad that again, there was no way to half-ass this, and there was also no way for this movie to come out and just make the required 500 mil and then go away. This movie had to do what it did to become the biggest fucking comic book blockbuster movie of all time. It had to go ahead and do that because it had to be, just like everything that's in the film, as much as I sort of get cynical about like soapbox movies or whatever, it had to be a massive, massive, massive success and a massive like rallying cry and a massive like if this gets 3 or 4 other movies greenlit, or if this gets 3 or 4 other people not being such dicks to each other, like then it's done its job. You know what I mean? Like it needs to get a few more movies greenlit, and it needs to get a generation of people, much in the way that the blaxploitation, what they call blaxploitation movies, did of the 70s, and then what the Spike Lee generation of the early 90s did. If this then starts another wave of people being like, hey, we can have diverse casts and crew, and we can all live with that. Like if that's what it teaches and if that's what it shares, then fucking brilliant. You know what I mean? Like that's what it needs to do.
I hope so. At the very least, it should get this entire cast and crew more work.
Right. Definitely.
These are some professionals. They made a good Black Panther movie, and boss, that's got to be tough enough.
Right. So I can't, and that I think that's fantastic. I think TV has already done it. I think movies were starting to do it with, the other. Let's not forget, like, the other huge franchise outside of Marvel right now is, believe it or not, the Fast and Furious franchise.
The Fast and the Furious.
And it's a multicultural... they even have characters who have never spoken a line of English. They don't show up very often, but they've had them in there that are all that are subtitled throughout the whole film. You know what I mean? Like, that's fairly... Like, I know everyone knocks those movies, but that's, like, fairly bold for an American blockbuster movie to have subtitling on that level,
and that would be the next step, right? That's why I've been doing
the
this.
Next step is to cross over, so that the Fast and
like
Furious
if I've been doing this,
and the Marvel
I'm gonna wake up screaming at that idea in the middle of the night. But no, it's like if I'd been doing this movie, like everybody was speaking Zosha the whole time, like they only talking English to Martin Freeman or something.
Right.
Just fuck it, subtitles the whole way through.
Yeah. Well, no,
there's an implicit understanding, right, in the comics that everything is translated anyway,
right?
And maybe they'll put things in brackets and have a little asterisk, like in a caption box down at the bottom, translated from whatever. But but I get it.
Was there a token white guy joke? I seem to remember there was a token about Martin Freeman. Was there?
Sure, he calls him a colonizer once. Yeah. That was, but then of course that's when he asks her a tech question, and she immediately drops it. So I think she was just being teenager with that. I mean, what?
I thought there was like a TWG joke in there. I don't know.
See, I've only seen it like twice. I'll give you that one.
There should have been.
I need to wait till it's in front of me.
But I have to say, like, I mean, I was when Freeman was in it as much as he was, I was kind of watching it and being like, who the fuck's this guy? And like, why should I care?
Right. And they beefed him up so he could have something to do in the climax too.
Right. But I did like when there was that point where he was being shot at by the spaceship, and he was in the hollow spaceship, the hologram spaceship or whatever it is. And he decided
guy in the chair.
stay at his post. That was good. I'm glad he got like a little hero moment. My favorite bit though was when the rhino comes running up to Okio, is it?
Yeah.
And then licks her. I thought that was my favorite bit because he comes charging along there. Because I'm like, those rhinos as pets are like the coolest thing ever, and I did not want to see, like, I was really hoping that we wouldn't see like a few rhinos like killed.
Right. War, but that's another thing. Oh God, there are war rhinos in this movie.
Yeah, which is awesome. There should be war rhinos in every movie.
Isn't it just? That is just yes. Yeah. But yeah, that was nice. Yeah. Yeah.
I like that because I'm like, there's no way that you can make a leap that human beings will attack each other regardless of family or friendly ties. But I ain't buying that a rhino is just going to blindly do what its master tells it to do. So certainly not attack its mistress, right? Because that was a whole, because they were together, right.
I'm like, ooh, stooping a general. Good job, good on you, mate. Yes. And the head of the royal guard, no less. I'm like, Jesus Christ, we are in the Marvel universe. Everybody be fucking everybody. It's great. Yeah.
Yeah. So they just need to. I mean, now that they've done this, they need to, and I know they've got Captain Marvel coming up, but let's get a few more female superheroes out there.
Goddamn prequel, yes, but yes, indeed, because that is the thing, right? If this hadn't done gangbusters, it would have gone down in history like another cautionary tale that the bean counters hold over all of our heads, because we know from the Sony hack, right, that they were. Before Wonder Woman, that they were still blaming like fucking Supergirl and Elektra for, how come we can't have any more female superhero movies? Like, well, we have, here's the list, and they've all lost money, and so what can you do? Wah, wah.
Yeah.
But God damn it,
and what's funny is
enough talent. And put enough talent and marketing money into it. Guess, it's like none of that matters. Huh? What? Oh, wow. Amazing. Huh?
Yeah, Wonder Woman, hands down the best DC movie since The Dark Knight. Hands down the best DC movie since The Dark Knight.
And I already reviewed it, spent about a month with that, so I'm just going to direct people to my website.
Yeah. Why don't we do that then, sir? Unless you have anything else to say on the subject of Black Panther and or one-off movies you would like to see the Marvel train produce, why don't you pimp your website and tell everyone where they can find your review of Wonder Woman and others?
Yes, and many others. 'Tis Marvel season, of course. I got to do a Spider-Man review when we're done with this. But yes, you can find all of my stuff at my website, and you thought it was safe, aytiws.com, or just search and you thought it was safe on YouTube. I should be the only thing that comes up. And 'tis Marvel season, and I got 3 left to go. Yes, of this. That are on home video at the moment. So, hopefully get them all done before Infinity War drops.
Yeah, and Infinity War, which if Black Panther is to be any gauge of, will probably be sold out in movie theaters in New York for the best part of 3 weeks. So I probably will not see it until I'm probably about a month after everyone else. But that's fine. I'm really not that worried about that. It's I don't really jump on them day one like I used to in quite the same way. But the reason why I wanted to do this episode was that like I say, cynical before I went in, watched the movie, and was genuinely impressed with the subject matter it got into a major blockbuster movie, which, as I said, it's 2018. I shouldn't be impressed by it. This shouldn't be a conversation. None of this should be an issue, but it is. So therefore, it has to be said, and a movie like this has to have as much attention put on it as is humanly possible.
And deserves all of it, because the pendulum swings one way or another, and hopefully it's going towards a better direction this time.
Yeah, and I hope this sort of, we're living very much in a kind of fairly hopeless scenario right now. And, we look for scraps of positivity on the horizon wherever we can find it. And
oh, hell yes.
If this is one of the, things on the horizon, if this is along with all the marches and everything that's going on, if this is a cultural touchstone that means something and brings people together and adds a bit of hope to the discourse, then hallelujah.
Indeed. I will second that. Yes.
All right, Chief. Well, that was fantastic and fairly concise for us. That was a neat
right.
hour 20. Well done.
I was trying to keep it focused. Yep.
It's good, sir. Very good.
Keep from wandering too far afield. I could have. Oh, God. But yes.
Yes. But I'm really glad that we both enjoyed it, and I'm really glad that I was able to get you back on the show to talk some more Marvel. I'm sure once Infinity War has been and gone, we'll be able to do something with that as well.
And I gotta say, I actually do like revisiting things like a month after, because by the time, even though it's packed for you, out here, it's just most of the theater, and I usually watch these early in the morning anyway, but it's usually just down to me and the old people in a nearly empty theater, and that's always the best theatrical experience for me.
Right.
Opening nights are all well and good. I just saw Pacific Rim 2. I just went to one of those. But yeah, after a while, and for, let's face it, most of these Marvel movies, it just becomes I have to go to the 21 and up theater, or it's just going to be a bunch of screaming kids.
Yeah.
Which is not a satisfying theatrical experience, let me tell you.
It's all good, dude. It's all good. I'm feeling a little bit more hopeful again. I hope that Infinity War finishes all the old guard and we can go forward and have some new stories. Because I think if it gets to the rinse and repeat situation, I'm going to drop off completely.
then they really will have recreated their comic book universe in maximum. In the macrocosm sense, yes.
Give me Howard the Duck movie. That's all I ask.
And then I get to watch, all you movie people go through exactly what we went through 20 years ago, and I will try not to laugh in public, but
right,
probably fail.
Well, with that, sir, thanks ever so much. You have a great evening, the other side of this country, and we will speak again soon. All the very best to you, Chief.
And the same to you, man. Yes, thank you very much. Always a pleasure. Stop by.
Well, marvelous, yes. Always a pleasure to have Mr. David DeMoss on the After Movie Diner, and if you didn't enjoy that, I would strongly suggest that you go down to a hospital and check yourself in, because you're most likely suffering from some form of mental disease. Anyway, before we end the show, those who have listened to the After Movie Diner these many years will know that myself does something of music occasionally. Does something of music. That doesn't really make any sense. But anyway, is something of a musician occasionally. And indeed, this week, if you look out under miscellaneous plumbing fixtures on Spotify, iTunes, Amazon, all those good places, Bandcamp, under miscellaneous plumbing fixtures, a new album, Former Glory, will be unleashed this week, probably a couple of days after this podcast drops. So why don't you go check that out? And to whet, with an H, whet your appetite for the album, here is a track off the album Former Glory by Miscellaneous Plumbing Fixtures. This track, as it is hockey playoff season, this track, which was first written and recorded over a year ago when the Maple Leafs hockey team had just been defeated in Game 6. Well, last night they were no longer defeated in Game 6. In 2018, they will reign victorious The Leafs won Game 6, going on to Game 7 with the Bruins on Wednesday. That's tomorrow night. Very excited about that. Anyway, in honor of that, in honor of the new album, here is a track called For the Leafs, written over a year ago, featuring the sterling work of the Miscellaneous Plumbing Fixtures players, the sort of hobbled-together group of digital masterminds that play on this album and sing on this album. It is Jay Mayo on backing vocals, Dr. Nicholas Console on the organ, and Johnny Cole on none other than the flugelhorn. Here we go. For the Leafs, from Former Glory by Miscellaneous Plumbing Fixtures. Out this week!
Wheels up and your mind's repeating. I wish there was comfortable seating, but it will all be okay if the Leafs get their way. Time's up, it's do or die all over again. You're not a fixer, just a friend, and it would all be fine if there was a little more time. And it was all done in Game 6, but they gave it all they could. And every moment, every minute, we all knew that they were in it, and it never been so good. Lights up and the crowd were behind us. It's push and shove, one hell of a fuss, and it would all go well, or it would all go to hell. Shut up, a few seconds left on the clock. One misstep and this whole boat will rock, and it all comes out in the wash this time.